Hello everyone, Ray McGrath, Waterford U3A here, and you're all very welcome. This is a recording we're doing a week or so after the transmission went out. So that's why instead of seeing a blue sky over my head, you might be seeing the rafters of my loft from time to time. But know that we did this walk some week ago. Right, so welcome to Where the Tide Flows, a walk in Cheekpoint with U3A member Ray McGrath. And we just hit here, I think we have a little video.
Members of U3A nationwide, welcome. Waterford, welcome to Cheekpoint, where the tides flow, where the Barrow meets the shore on its way to the sea. Members of U3A.
So just across the river from Cheekpoint is County Wexford on the left-hand side here. Behind me are the twin towers of the electricity generating plant at Great Island. Chimneys soon to be demolished as the plant transforms from being an oil-fired plant to a gas-fired plant. And on the right-hand image, you have the seagull perched on one of the poles of an old weir, an old fishing weir dating back hundreds of years, with the County Kilkenny shore in the background. And where are we? Well, you'll be familiar, of course, with Tramore. If I can get my little arrow going here. Where are you, arrow? You've disappeared. Here we are. So Tramore, 7 miles south of Waterford City. Dunmore East, over here just at the mouth of Waterford Harbour, across from Hookhead, and then upriver 16 miles up to 16 nautical miles up to Waterford, past Duncannon, Passage East. We come to the parish of Crook, and so easy to understand when one invasion was happening, that the invaders said, we will capture Waterford by hook or by crook. Whether it's attributed to the Normans, Henry II, or to Cromwell really is not that important for our purpose. But expressions do arise from bits of local history. And then going further up the river, we come to the village of Cheekpoint, right at the confluence of the Barrow, which has been joined by the Nore just above New Ross, and by the Suir, which rises away over in County Tipperary in the Silvermine Mountains. The Barrow and the Nore rise, the Barrow, I believe, rises up in Slieve Bloom, in the Slieve Bloom Mountains. So that's where we are. And Edmund Spencer, he was here, no great memories, or no happy memories, I should say, of Edmund Spencer, who was with Sir Walter Raleigh when they massacred 600 people down in Smerwick Harbour, down in County Kerry. But he did spend some years here, had an estate up in Lismore or Youghal, and visited many parts of the country. And it is said that his visit to where the Suir and the Barrow meet inspired lines of his in the Fairy Queen, referring to the source of the rivers, not too far from each other, and to where they join again, all which long sundered do at last accord to join in one, ere to the sea they come, so flowing all from one, all one at last become. Edmund Spencer, the Fairy Queen. And indeed, the three sisters do meet here in Cheekpoint, and another little video. So, starting here in Cheekpoint, village of Cheekpoint, traditional eel and salmon fishery. 7 miles downstream from Waterford, panning around to County Wexford, the power plant under the oak tree, the Barrow Bridge in the distance, separating the Barrow from the shore, and across to the County Kilkenny shore. So just in case the quality of the voice wasn't great, the camera panned around from the County Wexford shore, taking in the harbour of Cheekpoint, which is 7 miles downstream from Waterford, and then across to the Kilkenny shore. You might see the fishing weir. It seems to be halfway across the river, but it's much closer to the County Waterford shore. Fishing weirs date back to at least the days of the Crusade, of the Crusaders and the Knights Templar and the Cistercians. They all had a part in constructing these weirs and charging tax for their use afterwards. So Cheekpoint indeed was a gateway to history, prehistory, not too far from here at Cradenhead, halfway between here and Dunmore East. Recent excavations, recent finds have moved our chronology back 1,000 years. So now we believe that there was a settlement here, not too far from the village here at Cheekpoint, about 7,000, 9,000 years ago at this stage. So rewriting the prehistory of Ireland, as a matter of fact. Early Christian settlements abound around here, both here on the Waterford side and over on the Wexford side at a place called Kilmokia, which is now a guest house, gardens, and a very, very interesting visit. Here on the Waterford side, we have early Christian settlements at Crook, at Dunmore East, here in Faithlake, about 1.5 miles up the road. The Danes were here, voyaging up and down on their way to Waterford, or from Waterford up the Barrow, to have settlements further up on the Barrow, and further attacks on monasteries right to the heartland of Ireland. The Danes established Waterford around 914. It is believed, but Waterford Harbour was in fact a very important maritime base for them, and it's inconceivable that they would not have set foot here in Cheekpoint, although there's no record of such. The Normans, of course, the area is synonymous with the arrival of the Normans and the changing of Irish history. And the Normans arriving here in 1170, not about 2 miles from here, great walks from here to Passage and Crook, where the Normans landed. And I think we all know the story of the Normans subsequently. And it was Waterford Harbour off Cheekpoint here, between here and Passage and Dunmore, was for centuries and centuries where kings, pirates, and smugglers either escaped from Ireland or came to Ireland. And the smuggling, it is believed, went on for years and years and years after the 17th century, 18th century pirates. We might call them different names now, but it was smuggling. Waterford Harbour, a favorite place for smuggling. And part of that history, part of that maritime history, is the battle between Waterford and Baltimore. The mayor of Waterford, the corporation, the town of Waterford, at war basically with the town of Baltimore and the O'Driscolls of Baltimore for close to 250 years. They were back and forth, taking each other's ships, imposing taxes, and one of the forays of the Waterford men was down to court to recapture or to capture one of their own boats taken by the O'Driscolls. They used 2 boats to come down. They captured the boat they came for and brought it home. So 3 ships sailed back to Waterford, and hence henceforth it is believed that the 3 ships became part of the coat of arms of Waterford City, dating back to the 1500s, early 1500s. King James and King William were here after the Battle of the Boyne. King James stayed approximately 2 miles from here, just on the outskirts of Waterford City. And he took off for Duncannon, and from there on to France. King William followed on his way back to either Holland or England. Donacarua MacNamara, the 18th century poet, refers to Passage in one of his poems. He's on his way to Passage from Waterford, balanced. He's on a sidecar. He's on one side, he said, balanced by a box of herrings on the other side. He's off to Passage to take ship for Newfoundland, where he is believed to have spent many years. And of course, up and down this river was the Newfoundland trade for over 100 years or more. And German U-boats too. It was part of the area of the Battle of the Atlantic in the Second World War, but especially in the First World War, where many Waterford ships, especially two ships which we will mention later, sank on their way back to Waterford. Now, why isn't it going ahead for me? It seems to be frozen. So it has moved on. So here is, we're down in the harbour in Cheekpoint on the left-hand side, like Alpin's Pub. You can see the flood warnings. It's right down at the water's edge, and many a night was spent by people in the village trying to keep the tide back from getting in, hence the sandbags you see piled up waiting for the next flood. On the top right-hand side is Faithlig Church, just across from Faithlig House, which is in the slide below. The Suir Inn is the building on the left-hand side. It was established in connection with the Milford mail packet service, which operated from Cheekpoint between 1790s and about 1810. It was a project by Mr. Cornelius Bolton, who was the progressive, enterprising landowner of the time, and it is the same Cornelius Bolton that built Faithlig House. So Cheekpoint was really the center of a lot of activity at that period. Bolton had great plans for Cheekpoint, drew out the streets, named them, but it never materialized. I think he ran out of money. So we have McAlpin's Suir Inn, which has been in business here for 45 years. And again, a close-up of the sandbanks and of the sandbags, and a very precarious position, but it's a lovely, lovely spot. Next time you're down in Cheekpoint, do pay a visit when all of this COVID thing has passed. And we have Francis here. Francis is the owner right now of the Suir Inn.
Seafood pie. I know that, but I come to McAlpin. It's great. Where 45 years. I just started to salmon rolls. Well, everyone hopes. 50 years of business next year. We all hope that salmon will be forward. Yeah, wild salmon. Thank you very much.
So just in case you didn't hear that, Francis McAlpin is the owner of the Suir Inn, and we talked about how they started 45 years ago with salmon rolls, and the salmon has been a particular ingredient of the seafood pie, for which it is Tom Durley, as a matter of fact, commented on the Suir Inn and said it was one of the best seafood pies ever he ate, and he judged its chicken curry to be the best in Ireland. But Francis and I were talking about the return of the salmon. Salmon has been gone. Salmon had been gone from this river. Commercial fishing stopped in 2008, and I suppose we're all hoping that the salmon will once more come back, so that some degree, some form of fishing may once again take place in Cheekpoint. So we're headed off now, starting our walk, starting from the pier, from the quay in Cheekpoint, looking across at McAlpin's Inn. And so it's not a long walk, my dear friends, today. It's a rather short walk, maybe an hour and a bit. Certainly not a long walk. It's a loop, it's a circular walk. So I'm always reminded in circular walks of and in linear walks, of course, when you meet people coming back towards you, of the Chinese saying, if you want to know what lies ahead, talk to those coming back. Sometimes it is useful, it is valuable, in fact, just to go off with a mentality of getting lost. Rebecca Solnit has written a wonderful little book called A Field Guide to Getting Lost, which is really all about being present every step of the way. And so, as I say, it's not a long walk, but again, reminded of, I think, it came from America. I love long walks. The saying goes, especially when taken by people I don't like. I think it was Ellen DeGeneres who came up with that particular one. At least she is attributed with it. But sometimes it is useful to shorten the road. And the Gabon Sair was the legendary craftsman of Ireland. And so many stories are derived from sayings and stories of the Gabon Sair. The Gabon Sair set off one day to build a castle. He had his son with him. They'd hardly gone a mile when the father said to the son, "Shorten the road, son." And the son looked puzzled, looked at the long road ahead and said, "It is a thing I cannot do, father." So the Gabon Sair said to his son, "We'll go home now, if you can't shorten the road." And so they went home. And next morning they again set out. And again, about a mile down the road, the Gabon Sair said to his son, "Shorten the road, son." "It is a thing I cannot do, father." They went home again. And that night, the mother said to the son, why are you back? Why did you come back? What did your dad say? What did your father say?" "Oh," he said, "we'd hardly started when he said, 'Shorten the road, son.'" And his mother leant down and whispered something in his ear. The third morning, they again set out, and after a mile or so, the same thing. "Shorten the road, son." The son smiled, looked up at his father, and started, "Once upon a time, father." And the road indeed was shortened. Here is the River Road in Cheekpoint with the summer house, a place where Elizabeth Owen, a poet resident in Cheekpoint in the 1700s, wrote her poems, it is believed. Elizabeth Owen. If you Google her, you'll find a book of poetry, mostly composed here in Cheekpoint in the 1780s. So getting lost, just to refer back to Rebecca Solnit for a moment, but appropriate for any walk, I suppose, to be present every step of the way in the walk, to lose yourself. She said in her book, A Field Guide to Getting Lost, to lose yourself, a voluptuous surrender, lost in your arms, lost to the world, utterly immersed in what is present, so that its surroundings fade away. Rebecca Solnit, A Field Guide to Getting Lost. And of course, Robert Frost had his own take on roads that diverged. And he, of course, took the one less traveled. And that, as he said in his poem, and that made all the difference. But be careful with Henry David Thoreau, who also wrote about walking. And please do not take his advice. We should go forth on the shortest walk, perchance, he said, in the spirit of undying adventure, never to return, prepared to send back our embalmed hearts as relics to our desolate kingdoms. If you are ready to leave father and mother and brother and sister and wife and child and friends and never see them again, if you have paid your debts and made your will and settled all your affairs and are a free man, then you are ready for a walk. Henry David Thoreau, on his way to Walden, no doubt. And so we're at last, my dear friends, at last we're on our way. And we're into the local park. And what do we have? I think we have a little video clip here. We'll head into the park here, the local park, known locally as Dobbins Field. Passing some more Brescia on the way, still holding in. And we move on a little bit further on. I call these winter hellebore, but in fact it is winter heliotrope, turning with the sun. It's wonderful, these names, heliotrope, drawn to the sun helio, and trope, of course, that movement towards the sun. And where are we here? Sure, we have our invasives here, but I love this one. This is the winter Helleborine. It is, of course, winter heliotrope. And just a little bit further on in the park, he has a lovely playground in it. And across here on our way, we pass a Spanish chestnut tree. Cornelius Bolton planted chestnut trees here, Spanish chestnut trees, in the 1760s, testified by no less a person than Arthur Young, the great traveller and travel writer and agriculturalist who stayed with Cornelius Bolton in 1776, and comments on how Mr. Bolton had been planting trees in the Glazing Woods, which are still here. Descendants, no doubt, of these trees that were planted then. And in good years, the nuts ripen and produce a nice harvest. The sound seemed to come from a Central American jungle. Sure, we have our invasives here, but I love sorry about that, folks. That's there, and we've left the park now, and still climbing a little bit in the village. The village is on the slopes of the highest hill here in East Waterford, called Faithlick Hill, or the Menon. And here's a restoration project done by the local community in a CE scheme a few years ago, a reconstruction using dry wall technique, and the biodiversity coming back nicely on it. And the main entrance to the park, the local development group had a competition a few months ago to have these works of art placed all over the village. And here's a little bicycle just at the entrance to Dobbins Field. Great Waterford name going back to the 1600s, Dobbins Field. And looking down on the river in the background, that's the River Shore part before it joins the Barrow and forms Waterford Harbour. Some little delay here. Sorry about this, folks. Here, yeah. Skipped ahead there. Anyway, we're back to Pat Moore. I met Pat on the walk. Now, the quality of I held the phone or the camera too close to me, so you don't hear. We'll see what Pat says, but I'm going to tell you what he says afterwards because it may not come out clearly. Here's Pat. This is Pat Moore from Cheekpoint. Pat, I'm surprised to see you home with the tide falling. I thought you'd be over in Woodstown.
At this stage, there's too much pollution out there now for to keep an eye on the
And what's the future? That's the future.
There's no future as regards going.
And what is there any cure? And how can it stop?
When people stop polluting the water, the government have not to do with that.
So Pat Moran is an oyster fisherman, an oyster farmer, I suppose now, and he was a salmon fisherman. He saw the writing on the wall as far as the salmon, I think, and recycled himself. Invested in oyster production. You can see the tractors there, which he needs to get out to low water at Woodstown. It's about half a mile out to low water, and heavy work involved, carting stuff back and forth. And I said to him, I'm surprised, Pat, that you're here home with the tide falling. I thought you'd be over in Woodstown. And he said, oh, the oyster fishing is finished in Woodstown, he said. It's finished, I said. Yeah, he said, it's finished. Too much pollution in the water. And what causes, I innocently asked Pat, what causes the pollution? People, he said, people cause it. And so it's a sad story. A man who really loved his work and fears now that that period of his life, of his work life, may have come to an end. Just a reminder of the importance of quality of water, which we all have a role to play in. And further on down then past Pat Moran's house, we have this unusual structure. It's a tower, of course, as you can see, in the backyard of a house. And sometimes we pass by things. I've been passing this by for years. Only recently did I look into its story, into its history, and it's in an area called the Mount. And a bit of research revealed that the Allingham family had a place in Cheekpoint in the late 1800s called the Mount. Now, this here is dated by the Architectural Survey of Ireland as 1780s. So presumably it was here before the Allinghams came. Now, I call it the Umremarkable, which and so many times the Umremarkable has its remarkable story. And I'm sure that the poet John Allingham, who was an uncle of the William Allingham, who lived here. Sorry, I have it reversed. William Allingham was the poet. John Allingham was his nephew, and I am sure because William Allingham worked in New Ross, which is 15 miles upriver, that he indeed visited the Mount House and John Allingham when he was working there in the late 1800s and early 1900s. William Allingham, of course, we learned at school, is the poet who wrote up the airy mountain, down the rushy glen, we daren't go hunting for fear of little men. The Allinghams came from County Donegal, but it's interesting, isn't it, to have this connection beyond Cheekpoint. And we're headed now down to the shore here. Again, the owner of this property here is very community minded and has established, in fact, putting up the sign pointing to the strand, and very generously so. A little grass track leading down almost into the wilderness here, which reminded me, of course, when I was doing the prep for this, of Yeats's poem To the Waters and the Wild, and then we go on to the sea. Lovely view, isn't it? On the bottom right hand side here, that's taken from a walk from Passage, from Cheekpoint to Passage, further up on the hill, goes all the way down to Passage here. And what you see here is Waterford Harbour on its way out to the sea. Duncannon is on the left hand side. Passage is a spit of a type of platform jutting out from the right hand side from the headland there at Crook. Beautiful, beautiful walk there. And now we're down on the shore, so we're going to do a short section of the shoreline here. It's known locally as the Strand, but it's mud and sand combined. The lighthouse, of course, with my granddaughter standing there to give it perspective, one of the lights of my life. And the tide line, as you can see here on the right hand side, the very high spring tide seaweed line here. This was the last tide, so considerably weaker than the strong spring tide. The springs occur twice a month. It's the pull of the moon combined with the pull of the sun, so it springs the tide, hence the spring tide. Not just in springtime, but as I say, twice a month. The weaker tides then, when the moon goes at right angles to the sun, the weaker tides are called neap tides, and very important for fishing, because if you were to bring your boat up here, for example, at the highest of tides here, you'd be stranded until the next spring tide came in 2 weeks later. So very important for fishing. And then we have, I spoke earlier of the traffic up and down in front of Cheekpoint and Passage. And this is a view of the Formby, I think, one of the two Waterford ships struck by torpedoes in the Irish Sea a few days before Christmas in 1917. Terrible the worst maritime tragedy in Waterford. And we're going to play what became the lifeboat song, if we can get it in here. The lifeboat song by Liam Clancy. It has become the lifeboat song, almost an anthem for the lifeboat services. And further on, then coming back up now from the beach, from the strand, and coming up the Russian side. Is this playing, Billy? The speaker is not working. Sorry, folks, we don't know quite what has happened here, but we can sort this out when we're reviewing it. You know, speaker is not working.
Sorry, Rach, it was my fault. I was trying to play the music there for the Liam Clancy piece. But if you go back to share screen, it should bring back up your slides again. So
okay. And so we're coming up the Russian side here, coming up from the beach, and we're waiting for the share screen to come on here. And here we are.
There we go. Yep.
And so coming up from a lovely walk up, and just as we're coming up, I hear my neighbor.
So coming up the Russian side and turning around to, oh, here's Johnny. Johnny.
Hi, Ray.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Johnny, look at this. Tranquility flows. No need to ask here on the Russian side why tranquility flows.
Well, flows as it really is. It's obvious, like the river flowing up and down here forever and ever. Ever since I came down here 15 years ago in my house every weekend, watch the river coming down. It's up to your house. The construction
and you have connections here, Jody, with this Cheekpoint, yeah.
My dad is from Cheekpoint, and Cheekpoint native, and this was the farmland that the 11 acres that they had for his first farm living. And of course he moved then into Waterford and became a fitter.
And you have these views down over Waterford Harbour. Yeah. Okay. And then it took you how many years, Jody, working on the house?
Basically 15 years from the concept and drawing the plans for the planning commission and every weekend.
And there's a touch of America in it.
Well, I lived in America for 10 years. And while I was there, there was so many beautiful designs and houses there. And I just incorporated the best of what I saw into what I done.
And it's here on the Russian side. What's the story usually with the Russian side? As far as I'm aware, if you raise drops, something on before Francis in Sunstone, I think.
Tranquility as well. Yeah. Tranquility is, as my time as a merchant Navy officer. Okay, I've been through many storms, the worst of all being the typhoon in the South China Sea in my days as an engineer officer in the Merchant Marine. And of course, life, like everybody, there's ups and downs and storms for people's lives. So here I am, I'd say the closing part of my life, and I just like it to be calm and tranquil.
It's
so
just
here's my last harbor and last.
It's just the next phase of your life, Jody. Come on.
Yeah.
Jody is very optimistic. Jody represents the Green Party on Waterford City and County Council. So I'm sure life is not that tranquil, Jody, at times in your political career. But we did talk, just in case you didn't hear the voices, we did talk about his house, Tranquility Flows, and how he lives in a very tranquil place right here on the banks of Waterford Harbour, on the shores of Waterford Harbour. Talked about his house. There it was. I said to him, a flavour of America, Cape Cod in it. Yes, he said. Of course, we lived in America for 10 years. And then he talked about his days as a maritime engineer and how he was caught in a typhoon once in the China Sea. So Jody Power, ladies and gentlemen, Councillor Jody Power of the Green Party.
So,
and continuing then, we're almost completing the circle now at this stage. And this is known as the High Road or the High Street in Cheekpoint. And right down at the end is the entrance to a house called Ferrymount. And Ferrymount, even to villagers, it's not known widely that one of the more important people associated with the International Labour Organization lived here as a child and would come as a teenager, spent summers with his granddad, who was a sea captain. The story of Edward Phelan is really fascinating. He was a public servant, a civil servant, before independence here in this country. Then after independence, he represented the Irish government in the International Labour Organization, newly founded after the First World War. And he rose to the ranks and became its first Secretary General, and in Switzerland, in Geneva. And wonderful story of his description of his experiences in Cheekpoint as a child. One of the very few descriptions we have of Cheekpoint in the late 1890s, and then of this dramatic flight by car with the papers of the young International Labour Organization stacked up in the back of the car, seeking to get out of Switzerland, driving across France to the Spanish border, where he hoped to cross and take a plane to or a ship to Montreal. He had secured premises in Montreal at McGill University for the duration of the war, so that the work of the Labour Organization, the International Labour Organization, could continue. A most dramatic description of that journey. Well worth a read. Check it out. Edward Phelan, International Labour Organization, and I'm sure you'll come up with a reference. It's in the libraries, and if you don't have it in your own library, the library will arrange to get the book for you. So yeah, Edward Phelan of the International Labour Organization and his dramatic escape from Switzerland via France and Portugal to Montreal. So coming down the hill now, again looking at the Barrow, at the river shore where it meets the Barrow River, the Barrow Bridge, constructed as a railway bridge to link Rosslare and Limerick Junction. A train hasn't passed over that bridge now for the past 10 years, I suppose. But it's what a lovely view it is. And right down at the end where we're headed now, right down at the end here is a river buoy. And I think we'll have a little story down there once we get there. So it's Daisy Bank House, constructed here in the 1780s by again Cornelius Bolton of Faithlake House, turned into a hotel in the early days, or built as a hotel, I should say, in the early days of the Milford Cheekpoint packet service, mailboat service. And passing on the way, on the left-hand side, always asking the question, like, where do local names come from? And here, this little laneway is called the Rope Walk. And takes its name from the rope factory and how the ropes would be pulled and stretched along a straight 200-yard stretch of lane. So yeah, Bolton was an enterprising landlord. The rope factory closed when he went bankrupt, but the name persists, the Rope Walk. And other nearby place names, we have the Rookery, quay just under the Rope Walk, Rishiga, of course, the point of the ferry streak. There's a rock in the river. It is thought Canon Power of Place Names of the Dashes wrote a wonderful book called Place Names of the Dashes, and he has Rishiga as the rock in the river over which the tide ripped at certain times, creating a streak of foam behind it, hence the point of the ferry streak. And by hook or by crook, of course, we've already touched on that, and it's just a few of the many place names with stories attached. I'm back by the river now. And
so here we are once more down by the river, County Wexford shore, and the Great Island power plant. And coming back towards home, we have Catherine. Hello. Hello, Catherine.
Hello, Ray.
Really nice to see you.
Our great village character.
And you're sitting right in front of the sticks.
That's a beautiful place. My sons have taken pictures of those in freezing fog, and apparently that's where I live, is in the sticks. So it's lovely. This is a place of stories, and I try to add to it myself. I'm telling my grandchildren that the generating station river is chocolate factory. So we're very interested in that.
Yeah, and the sticks mark a landing, an old landing place with lots of stories of salmon being legally or illegally landed here in Catherine, you know. We don't see too many salmon now.
No. Is there such a thing as illegal fishing?
Well, there was always poaching, wasn't there?
There was always
which
poaching.
has a nice culinary dimension to it as well.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful place,
Yeah.
Cheekpoint.
You've been here now 16 years,
16
Catherine, haven't you?
years.
Yeah.
And it's a charming
And you moved, I mean, you were living in town, so you made a conscious decision to move here.
Yeah, sure did.
Yeah.
Near water, but I didn't expect to get this beautiful, quiet country place near the estuary. Beautiful.
It is. Catherine, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Ray.
so this is Catherine, my neighbor, and we talked about her children taking photographs of the sticks. These are poles to represent a landing place, and maybe somebody had a hope of hanging a net from them as well at some stage, in imitation of a fishing weir. And Catherine has been here for 16 years now, she said, and she came here to Cheekpoint for its tranquility, right on the shores of Waterford estuary. We talked about salmon. Very few salmon left, we said, and she said, yes, I haven't seen any salmon now for a while here. And so the conversation went, wishing her well for the weekend. So we're almost at the end here where the tide flows, and again on the right hand side, the Barrow Bridge and the River Barrow coming down from the Sleepy Blue Mountains, meeting the River Suir on the left hand side and forming Waterford Harbour, and of course the fishing boat, the punt, is emblematic of what life was like here in the village when eel and salmon were fished commercially. And again, a remnant of the fishing weir that I commented on earlier. You see the tide ripping through it. When I first came, this fishing weir is under where I live. When I first came to Cheekpoint 27 years ago, there were just a number of sounds that I would hear. The place was so quiet. And one of those sounds was the strength of the tide rippling through the poles of the fishing weir. The other sound was the train passing 4 times a day on the far side, and occasionally an outboard on a boat like this going out to fish the calm high water or the calm low water, depending on the kind of fishing they were doing. 3 sounds. And then, of course, seasonally, you might hear the birds as well. So, Slán Abhaile. So, Shinawil, and I hope it encourages you to get out and explore your own area, because what we might pass by every day and not even notice has stories, whether it's geology or history or nature. So listen, enjoy it, and get out walking. Bye now. Talk to you later.